So one thing I wanted to talk about today was getting reference. So I have your stuff graded from the first assignment. Some people had really good reference, lots of details, lots of things, and some people had very poor reference, okay? So anytime you do an assignment that you're going to be turning in, regardless of whether it's for me or any other instructor, reference should always be your first step. Never skip you getting any kind of reference because you really miss out on all the other stuff that you should be doing. So for like our next assignment, which we can start planning for, we're going to be doing a building, okay, like an exterior building. So you want to grab reference for buildings. So here is my neon signs folder. And then I have an environment folder. Okay, now to turn these kinds of things in so that I can see them, someone shared their page with me, so if you copied the URL to this, as long as it's public, I should be able to see it if you pasted it in. Or if you took a screenshot of these and then printed that or saved it as a JPEG, threw it into your folder, that also works. As long as I can see your process for doing this kind of stuff, because you'll find that at your age, you don't have enough content to go by. Okay, you're not aware of all the stuff that is around you to build. Okay, even like character art, this is just one of my boards. This is all Avenger stuff, but you can see the different styles from one image to the next of how they're doing basically the same topic. It's just a different style. And had you never seen that style, you may not realize that that was even a possibility or something that you would want to do or try or emulate or fix or tweak or modify or anything like that. So it's always good to have some sort of reference there. Here's some interiors, here's furniture, products, here's basement stuff, Zentangles, weapons, drones, doodles, okay? So your first step is always going to be that, going out, getting reference, seeing what other people have done. The second step should always be sketching. Don't rely on just one sketch. Don't rely on, I drew this thing and there it is and I'm happy with it. Sketch it from different angles, sketch different pieces of it, focus in on one area. These are the kinds of things that you would want to see. If I'm going to do a building, I want to see several buildings that have been drawn and you picked the best one of those drawings, just like thumbnails for a design, okay? And again, you can use Pinterest as a way to get ideas for these kinds of things in a sketch sort of fashion that would even help you out. Look at those. Those are pretty simple shapes, pretty neat looking. Cool. Okay, so those two things for every single one of our assignments you should have. Loads of reference and a good amount of drawings. Okay, more than one, less than 100. Find a good amount that's inside there. Here's creatures I thought was really cool. It's like super tiny creature robot things. Okay, so use those resources as you're working on your stuff. Thought I had this open already and I didn't. All right, so that should be good for that one. Yes, okay. And just like before, we will have a little bit of overlap. Typically that day, the Wednesday before, the 18th, that's when we're going to go over the next assignment. So between now and the 16th, do your research, okay? Spend time doing your research. Spend time playing with that to understand what you're going to do. It'll just make your life a lot easier. Cool. Questions on the sheet? No? All right. All right. Now, the next thing I wanted to go over was more modeling tools. Some things that you will see that you want to add to yours as little bits of detail. Obviously, that will come into play the further we get into these assignments. Last time I went through how I started my model, and then we talked about I mentioned the video where you can go through and see these three things here. These are all polygon modeling tools. So every time we create a polygon thing here, those tools apply to that item. Whenever you render, regardless of what it is, it's going to take that item, convert it into polygons if it's not, and then render it out. Okay? So if I were to create a NURBS sphere, it's going to convert it into polygons and then render it out. If I have a polygon cube it's going to convert it to polygons, which it already is, so it doesn't convert it. Make sure they're triangles and then render it out, okay? So that's what these are. The stuff here, curves and surfaces, these two are areas where these are going to create NURBS surfaces, but we can automatically convert them into polygons, okay? So let me go into, that's good. I'm going to go into my front view here, and I'm going to create a NURBS, sorry, not NURBS, I'm going to create a curve, and I'm going to do a CV curve. So you can think of this like the pen tool inside of Illustrator. If I draw a shape like so, boop. Okay, so there's my shape. This is a curve, so any of these things I can typically use on it. Most of the time, you don't need to use this area, okay? Some things that you might have to do that I've had to do in here would be, let's say, a fillet, rebuilding the curve, so if I need more points, okay? So right now, if I go to Control Vertex, here's the amount of points I have. I may need to add some more points. Let's say I put 20 here and say rebuild. Now I go here and I have a lot more points. And that just gives me more room to kind of play with those points and tweak what they look like, okay? You can also go to Curve Point, click where you want a point, and then go to Curves, Insert Knot. It'd be much easier if it just said Insert Point, but it says Insert Knot. So there's the point, okay? Let me delete that. I'm going to go to create a NURBS circle. You'll see at the bottom circle and square. These are both curves. This is one of the reasons we don't use NURBS too often. You'll see that this square is actually broken up into 4 pieces. They could have just done it in one, but whatever. In Cinema, it's great. You create any of these. You get options. What do you want fillets to be, roundness, all that. In here, you don't. So if I go to curves, I can do things like fillet this. Okay, and that fillets that shape. Most of the time, like I said, you're not going to use these tools. Most of the time, you're just going to draw your shape out and then go from there. So you can definitely look more of those up. If you want a video on just those tools, I can go through it. But at this point, it's not really necessary. So I'm going to go into the front view. Anytime you use the curve tool, front view, side view, top view, any of those, any of the orthographic views. This is a perspective view. So if I were to try to draw in here and I go like this, it's still drawing it flat, but it's drawing it on the grid. Okay? So I have very little control over this. I want to always draw it in one of these. Okay? I also use my snap, so I'm going to hold down X. This is my center line. I'm going to click here. I'm going to hold Shift after I click there. And then I'm going to let go of Shift. These 2 points are perfectly straight. And then I can just do whatever. So if I did something weird like this. And then I'm going to go back here. So I'm going to hold Shift and X and go straight and then hit Enter. Okay? So that creates this. So if you remember from the intro class, one of the things we do as a product, usually we start off with a curve and we revolve it, right? Maya has that same thing, just called revolve. Options are in here. Typically, you want to go to the options for this. Now, the top part will always be different for every one of these other tools you go to, but the bottom part will always be the same. What kind of item do you want to get out of this? So I'm going to use the y-axis as the default. I'm going to leave it as an object, and I'm going to change this. This is where I can convert it into a polygon. These options, every time I go through this process, are the same thing. So I go to polygons, quads, general, per span, and per span. Okay, typically you have to change this here and there. And basically what this means is for every division you have on the NURBS version of it, I want a division on the polygon version of it. Okay, if I set this to 1 and 1, it will create a very rough, blocky looking shape. If I set them to 3 and 3, it'll make a smoother shape. If I add more divisions here, it'll add more divisions. I can change these numbers afterwards, so I'm not locked into it. So I'm going to hit revolve, and you'll see we get a shape. There it is. Here's my revolve. Here's the end sweep, so I could play with this. So if I wanted to have just half of that, I could. If I wanted to change how many divisions there are, I go to this thing called NURBS Tessellate. this is the object where it's converting it. So it takes the NURBS surface, makes that, and then converts it, and that's what this is. Here's the divisions. So you can see by adding more divisions, I can add more divisions this way, or if I go to this number, I can add or subtract divisions that way, okay? So stuff to just keep in mind as you're building these kinds of things. So that's that revolve. There's also a loft. I wish some of these worked more like the ones in Cinema, but whatever. So I'm going to take these two curves here, I just duplicated it, and go to Loft. You'll see different options on the top. Here's that polygon option at the bottom. It copied my settings, so quads, general, per span, and Loft. Now that doesn't look too exciting, but if I take this and rotate it and move it around, you can see how it's following that shape of that curve. Now, what's even cooler is that I can take this, let's say make that one bigger, and I can loft between these three surfaces. And then whatever I do to that middle one, oops, right? So you can tweak what the shape looks like. And now I haven't edited the points, but I can go to my control vertex of the curve and tweak those so that I can, again, get different shapes out of that. Okay, so again, another way that you can create polygons that are not just standard default cubes, cylinders, whatever. Now, those two I rarely use, Loft and Revolve. I don't use planar pretty much ever. Birel is another one. I don't use that one. These are also ones, beveling, I'll randomly use. I'll show that in a minute. But I do use Extrude a lot, okay? And I use Extrude for doing cables. So if I'm going to go to my curve tool, let's say I want a cable that goes like this. The more points I have, the more control I have over it. However, the more, bumps and stuff. All right. So there's my curve. Now I'm going to create a circle. And this works exactly like it would inside of Cinema, where you have two paths, or you have a path and a profile, and it's going to extrude one along the other, okay? So I grab the circle first, shift-click this one, and then I go to Extrude option box, and there's three different kinds of extrudes. This setup, I want to use the far right one, and it's really easy if you just click the four right things. That's all we need to set here, and then convert it to polygons, and then extrude. And so now we have a cable, okay? Then I can take this shape and scale it down to control what that's going to look like as far as the sizing of it. Or I could go into the vertices and I can grab some of the vertices. And let's say that I'm going to grab these two here. Let's squeeze that in. I'm going to grab these and spread those out. Go back. There we go. Oops. Now it needs to be rotated. That's weird. Yes, sir.
If you do this and you render the thing out, will the circle on the bottom still show?
No. This is just a curve. Curves do not render.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yep. So it's only polygon surfaces that will.
Okay.
Now you can see this looks pretty chunky right here. So there's that tessellate option. There's always going to be two numbers, a U and a V. We'll get more into these and you work with them more. But basically, if I were to look at this and go to Control Vertex, this point right here, if I can click on it, it might be hard to see, but that's a U. Okay. So on NURBS surfaces, they have a direction. The U is like the starting point, and it goes like around here. The V is the other direction, how it's following the path. Okay. So if I want to control the divisions going this way, which one of those numbers do you think I'll play with? V, right? 50-50 chance. Yep, that's it. Now, if you don't know that, it doesn't matter because there's two numbers. If that didn't work, I'll grab the other one and change that. Go there. Go here. Okay. Now, this is where we're talking about optimizing our stuff. Again, this assignment, we're not too concerned about it. Future assignments, we will be. This shape will render super smooth, especially if I go like that. But that's going to take a long time to render that individual piece, okay? Especially if I was trying to do some VR stuff with it. Let's too many pieces. Let's put that back to like 6. There we go. Now I can still do like 1, 2, and 3 on this and smooth it out if I needed to. I can still grab faces afterwards, like this, and extrude that out and give this a little bit of thickness. And then go into my edges here and here and there and there. Add a little bevel to it. 2 segments. And then hit 3, and now I have like this little clasp in the middle. Like I have a cable, and there's a little crimper or something on there holding it in place, right? So I can still do all that stuff. When I'm done with it, I can delete the history and it locks it in. If I'm not done with it, I can still edit that NURBS circle, and I can still edit the curve. So even though I drew this in front view, I can still go to the vertices for that path, and I can still offset them. And you'll see that everything that I just did still follows it. So if I'm trying to make it look like this cable is, let's say I have a robot and he has a cable coming from his shoulder to his elbow, I can make it look like the wire is draped, right? So it's not just like comes out, goes here, and comes back in. That looks fake. I'd want it to look like it's an actual cable that's like tied into the robot some way. So by controlling the points, I can definitely get that look. If I grab more than one point, I can rotate them. And you see I hit a weird spot where it just went inside out, and I'm going to undo it. I don't know what happened there. It just didn't like something. Probably at this point, watch that point, probably when it crosses through it. Yep, about when it crosses through it, it just didn't like that. So maybe if I just grab this one point and just push it back up. Nope. Maybe it's you. Nope. And that also changed my inset there. So it did. Now, what's cool too is I have that curve. So I can just grab these again, go back to extrude, and now I have it back to with the default shape that it was. Okay. Some housekeeping things in case it's not working. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes your curve is like way off, far away. You want to make sure that both of these items are just right there in the middle of your outline or somewhere. They're not grouped at all, because if it's grouped and they're moved and whatever else, it'll cause some issues. So make sure they're out there by themselves. I also will freeze transform things, and I will also center pivot and delete history on things. And that usually gives me pretty decent results or pretty expected results. Extrude again. There we go. Okay. Now let's go into Illustrator, and I'm going to go to this. I'm going to try to go to this. It's not going to go. You suck, Illustrator. There we go. Just had to talk bad about it. All right. So this is something I drew inside of Illustrator. I just made a square. I rounded off the corners. I wrote my name vertically, adjusted my kerning. Is it kerning if it's vertical lettering, or would it be letting? It's a good question, right? All right, well, I adjusted the space between the letters. There you go. And then what I did was I grabbed all my wording and I converted my wording into outlines. So right here, create outlines. So now this is no longer a font. I can't type. This is just text, or just paths. Okay. Here, this is actual text. I can go in here. Oops. Unless I messed that one up. I probably did. Maybe I saved it on a previous version. I don't know. It should have been there. Oops. Come on. Delete this. Delete that. Okay. Well, I don't need that one anyway. I just wanted the one. So just so you can see that process. Sarcona. And that. And create outlines. Okay, now this will give me paths for each piece of this. So the center of the A, if I ungroup it, oh wait, I'm in a different software, aren't I? Ungroup, that's what I hit, Control-Shift-G. I hit you. No, it's not working, Control-Shift-G. Camtasia is probably just going crazy, it doesn't know what to do. Object, ungroup, you're ungrouped. All right, well you get, All right, well, whatever. It's two pieces, okay? It's the A part and it's the cross. They're two pieces. So then I went to my shape, my Pathfinder, and then I combined those together so that they're one shape. That way, Maya will recognize this as one shape. The R, the same thing. You can see what happened there, so I just used the Pathfinder to combine it. The N was needing that also, and the A again. I think the O was good, the C was good. I did have an issue with the C at the bottom. I'm not sure what the font was, but it's like it chunked it right there. So I subtracted that point, and then I added a point, and then just kind of pulled it out. Not sure why it did that. Oops. Smooth it out. There we go. Still kind of chunky, but whatever. That's good. That's good. Okay. The S has it too in this one. All right. So that's what I did with this. And then I saved this as Sarcona sign, and I'll put 02 so I don't screw up my original. And I saved it as an Illustrator 8. So anything that you draw inside of Illustrator can be brought into Maya as long as you do that path. You tell it to save it as Illustrator 8. Yes. Okay, let me delete that because I don't want it. Then inside of Maya, I went to create Illustrator Object. And it asked me, do I want to bring it in as curves or do I want to bring it in as a bevel? So I'm going to bring it in as a bevel. I'm going to say create. It's going to ask where my stuff is. I set my project, but it's just jumping to this random folder. There, building, source images, sign. I can delete the one on the right. Mesh separate. All right, so let me delete this for a second, and then you can see. Okay, so there's the S. Here's the A. You can see, again, it's broken up into two different parts. That might be something that I wanted. Like, for some reason, I may want that center part of the A so I can do something with it. But I really don't, so gone. All right, so bringing it in as an Illustrator object, this is what it does, is it creates this, where it's just a beveled shape. Okay, so it's basically extruding it and then rounding the corners just like it would inside of Cinema. If I come over here, this is all the stuff that goes into making it look like it does. So if I go to my attribute editor, it's a lot easier to see, even though it might not seem like it. I'm going to go to Bevel Plus, which is this, Bevel Plus. Okay, so any curve that I do, as long as it's a closed curve, I can do Bevel Plus and it will create the surface. Okay. Here's where I can control where the bevels are, so I can just make it straight. In Cinema, they call them fillets. In Maya, they call it a bevel. I can control the width and the depth. I can control the extrude distance. That's good there. I'm going to go to the Illustrator for bevel. So this is linking automatically to my Illustrator file. So if I were to delete my Illustrator file or forget my Illustrator file at home, this won't load. It'll just be like gone. Okay, so make sure you have that by your files. Here's the style of the curve, so I can go with straight in, straight out, convex in, convex out. There we go. So on the outer style curve, there's that. There's this. Okay, so it'll turn green sometimes, just ignore it. There's that. Okay, so you can create some pretty cool shapes just by drawing a curve, bringing it in. These are connected, so whatever I do on the thing back here, it's also doing to my lettering. Okay. Now let's say that I'm happy with the way this looks. I'm not yet. I just want to fix one more thing and then I will be. Bevel Plus, Polygon Output Options. And I'm just going to make sure this is on Complete and Curve Span. And then I can control, not that one, this one, how many divisions I have there. There we go. Okay, so now this is nice and smooth. Ignore the fact that it's green. That's just a fun Maya thing. They want you to assign the default material to it again. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to delete history on it. All of these, I'm just going to reassign the material so I can see what's going on. There we go. And let's look at the A here, because this is where we're going to see this. So on that bevel, this is way too deep for the letter. So I need to shrink this down tremendously. 0.01, 0.01. oops, 0.01. There we go. That feels much better. It was a little bit chunkier before. Everything else looks like it's coming in. I may not want that style of curve, so I can go to my outer style curve and change this. I may want this to be convex out like that. Now the outer style is only going to be apparent on something like an O or an R or a P. This is the outside, this is the inside. Okay, so if I go to inner style and I change this to one of these, you'll see just that center part change. So just something to be aware of. You may want to make sure that they are the same thing or whatever. Okay, so I'm happy with the way that looks. I'm going to delete history. And now these are all just geometry. There's no connection to anything. There's nothing I can change. They're just there. Okay, now in here I just created it. I made the Illustrator shapes, brought it in, Bevel plussed it. It works. Now look at building there. This, I lied, maybe. There it is. This. Okay, so this is my sign that I built the same way that I built the other one, but then I have this going around it. So this was done using the curves that I brought in and an extrude. So I extruded around it, okay? And I did the same thing with each one of these letters. So the same way that I made that little like cable is the same way I made that. And the purpose for it is that if I went to my Pinterest page, and I looked at none of these, it was there a second ago. This one, I basically have a piece of geometry for where the sign is at, and then I have this big piece of neon that kind of follows along it. So that was the idea with that, is that I wanted to create the outline for my neon to be there. So I created it as a regular Illustrator object using the bevel, and then I also did it as curves. There it is. And somewhere in here, where are they at? There they are. It brings in just the curves. And then I can grab this, create a NURBS circle, and I'll show you where it doesn't work, because it's probably not going to work. So I'm going to grab my circle, shift-click my C, and then do my extrude. Okay. 101. All right, that's good. Then I'm going to grab my circle again, shift-click the R, the A. Okay, it's making me a liar. This is not good. Yep, that's the way it goes. That's how it goes on today. You spent an hour struggling with it to get it to work correctly the other day, but then today it works fine. Let's do this. Let's go and delete all these. Yes. I'm going to isolate this so I can delete these, so I can grab this, move this up, move that over. Let's try it again. Try it again to mess it up. Surface, extrude. Nope, you still work, you son of a gun. All right, well anyway, it would just jack up, okay? It would be just like this garbly, messy surface, and that was yesterday apparently, or the other day. It's not today. Whatever. We'll see if this works, because this didn't work yesterday either. Sometimes under your Bevel Plus, if you go to the option box, it does that. Value is out of range, number 3. I'm glad at least one of these errors is coming up again. So usually what I'll do is I will grab the pieces. So in this case, I'm going to grab the O, both of these circles, and just apply that Bevel Plus. Then it does it, and then I can go into the options for it and tweak what I need to tweak. Okay? Sometimes it just, for whatever reason, gets stuck. The only fix I found is to delete your preferences, and then it works. But I don't want to delete my preferences, so I did that. Okay? You could also go into Maya if you're just doing type, and you can do create type. And this works very similar to like Cinema Type, where you just type the stuff here. Here's your font size, here's your tracking, here's your kerning, leading, so on. There's a type manipulator, just like Cinema, so you can grab individual letters and adjust their spacing. You can choose, obviously, your fonts up here. And then there's other areas at the top where you can control what the other, sorry, not there, up here, where you can control what these things are looking like. So you can say, like, I want the frame number here. And if you wanted the, oops, turn that off. If you wanted the frame number to always be like visible in your scene, let's say you're doing a countdown, you want like geometry that's animated, you could do that. You could do the scene time, which is the time that's currently down here. Animated text, so you can animate it and say at this frame I want this, at this frame I want that. It's pretty cool. Or you can do Python, which is a script. So right now it's giving a rounded random number right there. So if you do Python, you can do that too. Under the geometry, this is where we can control different things like the resolution. And here is what the profile is looking like. Why aren't we seeing that? That should be good. No. Oh, extrude offset. There we go. Okay, here's bevels. So if you're just doing text, do it inside of there. If you're doing something fancier, you may want to do it inside of Illustrator. Okay. You could also do deformable type. Now you'll notice that nothing on the front of this has divisions. If I say deformable type, it'll actually add divisions to the front of this. Okay. And that's for if I was going to like twist the lettering. Without those divisions, it wouldn't twist. It would just be like chunky in the fronts would look ugly. Now that it has divisions, it would allow me to twist those things. All of these are just the options for adjusting that. Okay. And then again, just like always, I delete my history when I'm all done with it. If you work at home and you have font A, you come here, you don't have that font, it won't work. Okay, it'll look for that font. So just make sure you delete your history or you have the same font on both computers. All right, and then the last things I want to cover are just some other things you may want to make a new scene. You may want to utilize while you're modeling stuff. So I'm just going to add some divisions to this that way. Under this deform menu, even though it says deform, you can think of these as ways to help you model certain things. Okay. This surfaces menu, there's a lot of great things in here, but I only use a chunk of them compared to the other ones. But this deform, there's so many other things you could use right here. So one of them is under the nonlinear area. So bend, I click that. I go to bend here, I go to the word curvature, and I middle drag. And then you can see how I can get that to bend. Now, I could obviously create a torus or something and use that. But I have a lot more control over how this looks compared to a torus. Just by moving that shape, I can create different things like that, right? I'm going to delete that. I'm going to go to flare. This creates an input here. There's a flare start and a flare end. And I'm going to go to the start of this and just drag this out. And then I'm going to go to the curve and then just drag that. And again, you can see how we're able to create these kind of unique shapes by using these kinds of things. Okay, instead of me trying to model that, I could do it this way. Let's delete that. Here is squash. Again, just a fun one. And then here's twist. And they can be stacked on top of each other, so you can do like squash and twist, where that might be something very difficult to try to model. Well, now just by adding those two things to a cube, I've done it. And if I hit 3, now I have this on here. Now that alone doesn't look fancy, but let's go back to the very beginning of this where I have my cube. And if I were to add more divisions, you can see how we can create these nice, smooth, really cool high-res details. And then if I were to duplicate this, duplicating in Maya deletes the history, so this one doesn't have history, this one does. I can go into here and grab, let's say, this here and that there, and then I'm just going to scale these in. And again, I can create some kind of cool decorative top to something, right? Much easier than I would if I was going to grab a cube and try to model it into that shape, okay? If I wanted to keep this exactly where it is, but just get rid of these things, I need to click on this and delete history. Now it's locked in. I can't edit those, but it's locked in. If I move this away, it does that. So don't move it away. If I wanted to keep everything as is so I can edit it later, I group everything, then move the group, and that doesn't screw anything up. Okay? So for this, I'm just going to delete history, and there we go. So that was all the nonlinear. There's also a wave one. It does like a wavy thing, sort of sine, very similar. This assignment really doesn't apply. Let's see. Here's lattice. Lattice allows you to grab individual points. So let's say that I wanted to change the proportions of this sum. I make this lattice box around it. I right-click and go to lattice point. And then I can grab these and move it up, scale it out, grab those. So you can kind of think of this as like a puppety warp tool where it's giving me less points and it's tweaking all the points inside that realm like that. Okay, so again, just an easy way for me to be able to tweak that shape. Delete history again, that goes away. Oops, wrong menu. I want to see if there's any other ones that really apply to what we're doing now. Nothing there. Yeah, nothing there. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at those ones. Typically the nonlinear good, and then just that lattice one I've used a lot, especially if I'm doing something I just need to kind of move all the points and adjust them. I'll use that. If I was trying to move these points and get that shape, there's no way. Trying to scale these and keep it nice and smooth, it would take probably forever. Okay. Cool. So that gives you an extra 2 menus of stuff to play with. Questions on those? What was that? Under the modeling menu, under deform. And then you'll see that same deform menu is also under rigging. And I believe it's under animation too. Yep. Because those are also animation tools. Those things could be animated. If you're doing a bouncing ball, you want to squish and squash and stretch and whatever else, you can utilize those. Cool. Nothing else?
What is a NURBS object?
Oh, what is a NURBS? So when you're doing something in a CAD program, so like Fusion 360, you're doing stuff like this. These are all math-based surfaces, okay? So the radius of this is not defined by individual points, it's defined by an actual like 3-inch diameter. And then how thick do you want it? It's exactly a 1/2 inch. And how tall is it? It's exactly this. So the entire surface exists because of all these mathematical numbers that go into it.
So it's like a vector.
Yes, okay. Now the downside of it is that it needs that math to be there. So for instance, let's say I grabbed a sphere and I hit 1, this is what the actual points are telling it to look like. But if I hit 3, it'll look like that because it says, keep it nice and smooth. So I'm going to duplicate this and do this like that. Now on these, I can't just go into faces and delete stuff. It just doesn't let me do it. But if I created a relationship between these two shapes, it'll let me delete parts of it. So if I go back to my modeling, I go back to the surfaces menu and I say intersect. It creates these lines right on the center of it. And then I can grab this one and use the trim tool and say I want to keep this area. I want to click on this one, go to the trim tool, and I want to say I want to keep this area. And now I have like that piece cut out. Now most of the time you'll find automotive stuff, like anything automotive or a heavy product, is going to be done in NURBS because they need that precision. When we're working, it's more about the looks of it. So we're more concerned about, I need that shape. I'm just going to rotate a sphere and just like cave it in, and it's going to look good because of how I did that. But you can do a lot of stuff with this that you can't do with a polygon as far as tools go. I'll even put a fillet on here if I can remember where this is. Surface fillet, there it is. Again, this is like a weird, like this menu is like screwed up. I don't know why that does that. Create curves on surface. I need to check that one. And then I'm just going to hit Oops, I don't want this to be polygon on the way out.
There's no way to open that menu anymore, is there?
No, there isn't. I don't know why it's like locked to that. Create. I don't see it anywhere. All right, well, we'll just deal with it. All right, so there it is. I'm going to shrink this, -0.1. And that will be -0.1. There we go. And then I'm going to use the trim again. Trim this. Come on. There we go. And then I'm going to turn on my two-sided lighting so I can see the inside of that. And you'll see how we get this nice smooth shape from one piece to the next. Now we're getting this faceting because mathematically they're there. It knows where to go, but display-wise it can't show it because it's still displaying the polygons. When we render this, if I were to turn the lights on, Arnold lights Skydome, you'll see that there's still these like lines that are there. So on the surfaces, like each one of these is a separate surface, I would have to go into their tessellation, crank the tessellation up so that it calculates enough divisions there, okay? That's why we don't use it. It's so complex to get anything out of it, and everything's going to end up polygon anyway. But